Welcome to another flip video lesson. This flip video is the last one for chapter 14 in our unit about Andrew Jackson. This one's simply titled Jackson and the Natives. This is for lesson 14.7. Don't forget this video is meant for educational purposes. So as you're watching the video, if there's anything you do not understand, please make sure you pause the video, rewind it, and re-watch it. Don't forget also, if you're taking notes and filling out an outline, that you can earn extra credit for that in class. Let's begin, shall we? Before we actually get into Jackson and his relationship and the U.S. government's relationship with the natives during the 1830s and on, let's first talk a little bit about the background to Jackson and the natives. First off, in the early 1800s, settlers were starting to push more and more into the southern coastal region. As this map right here shows, the reddish color is where people were living, and the other color is where there was not a lot of settlement. There were a lot of settlers starting to push from this section down into here. Settlers even petitioned the government, looking for more land in present-day Alabama and Georgia. What they wanted is they wanted to get the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, and the Seminole natives out of that area. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, why would American citizens, who must be hardworking farmers, want to get rid of these Native Americans who are living there? There must be a good reason. Well, I don't know if it's a good reason, but I can tell you this. These settlers wanted the natives out of the area, so then they themselves could move in to till and farm more land for cotton. Not to make food, but for cotton. In 1814, Andrew Jackson led forces against the natives. He defeated the Creeks and captured 22 million acres. 22 million acres. Between then 1814 and 1824, Jackson negotiated 9 out of the 11 treaties between the American government and the Native Americans. And these treaties were to get natives land in exchange for land west of the Mississippi River, which what we know as the Great Plains. Now, natives had various reactions to these treaties. First off, there was the feeling of appeasement, as this picture here shows. Oh, this guy at the heart is going, "I'm sorry," as an olive branch. And the other guy going, "I don't care about your sorry. I'm still going to do something bad." So the Creek, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, and the Choctaw gave up most of their land so they could keep just a little bit. Their thought was, okay, we'll do what you're asking of us in the hopes that you let us keep just even a smidgen of our homeland. That's appeasement. Giving in, hoping that you don't lose everything. Some Native Americans adapted. That's how they responded to what had just happened to them. And 5 tribes took to practicing American culture, and these were known as the 5 civilized tribes. They started farming like Americans. They started having slaves like Americans. They started teaching their kids through the American education system like Americans, all in the hope that of, hey, if we act like Americans, maybe we'll be treated like Americans and not get kicked out of our homeland. And then there were some Native Americans who just plain out resisted. I'm going to skip to the third one here because chronologically it's what happened first. There then was what was called the First Seminole War from 1817 to 1818, where the Seminole tribe in the Florida area, they fought back. They resisted this grab on their land. That resisted these American settlers trying to get their land was the Cherokee. In 1831, the Cherokee went to the Georgia State Court, and their argument was this. The whites had a law that people who were white had to have a license to be in native land. So whites just can't come to our land and take it. Also, the Cherokee in treaties with America had been called a sovereign nation. So they used this to say that, hey, you can't just take our land. You view us as a sovereign nation. The Supreme Court, though, ruled against the tribes. So here you have three different things the natives did to try to keep their land, and all three really ended up not really working. Let's move on now to Jackson's take on natives. And I have for you, let's see, four different quotes of Jackson from letters he wrote to various people. He wrote some of them to different men who were in charge of representing the government to the natives. Some of them he wrote to friends, to advisors. Instead of me just reading it, because that's going to be boring, I'm actually going to have Jackson's speechwriter come and say it. I'd have Andrew Jackson come and read them to you, but, you know, that's silly because Andrew Jackson's dead. One moment, please. All right there, sir. I know you're really old. Why don't you have a seat here, little Timbo? All right there, Mr. Volkman. My name is Mr. Timbo. I'm really old, and I wrote Mr. Jackson's speeches. Yeah. I'm going to read 4 quotes. Mr. Volkman doesn't want to. I don't know why. He's kind of crazy. So here we go. President Jackson wrote this in 1830 in a letter, and he said about the natives. These untutored sons of the forest cannot exist in a state of independence in the vicinity of the white man. If they will persist in remaining where they are, they may begin to dig their graves and prepare to die. Here's a second one now, and it's right there. Whoa, there's a circle on the screen. Whoa, I've been alive for a while. That took me up. Yeah. Here we go. I beg of you to say to them that their interest, happiness, peace, and prosperity depends on their removal beyond the jurisdiction of the laws of the state of Mississippi. Yeah. So, from these 2 quotes, I know I'm not the teacher, I'm just Mr. Timbo. How did Jackson view the Native Americans? He calls them untutored sons of the forest. He says if they stay where they are, they'll dig their own graves. But then he talks about, in their interests of being happy and at peace and prosperity, that they need to move. I'm not a teacher. I'm just going to read what they wrote. I'll let Mr. Volkman teach. Here we go. Here's another one. A quote that President Jackson wrote about the natives. Oh, got an itch. I've been alive for a while, so my skin's flaky. Jackson said this: I was satisfied that the Indians could not possibly live under the laws of the states. If now they shall refuse to accept the liberal terms offered, given to them, they only must be liable for whatever evils and difficulties may arise. This is difficult to read. I'm old, you see. Here we go. Last one, kids. I feel conscious of having done my duty to my red children, and if any failure of my good intentions arises, it will be attributable to their want of duty, not to mine or to me. I'm old and I can't see well, so I can't read Mr. Volkman's writing of that. There you go. I'm going to get up and go because I'm old and I'm tired of reading. Courtesy of Mr. Timbo, we now have 4 different quotes, kind of showing us what Andrew Jackson thought of the Native Americans and of what he felt was going on between the Native Americans and American settlers wanting their land. Now, I'm curious. I want to let you draw conclusions as to how Andrew Jackson viewed Native Americans. So take a moment, and for extra credit, send me an email. What do you think Jackson felt about Native Americans? Did he feel negative toward them? Do you think he felt okay, that he felt, yeah, Native Americans aren't too bad? Do you think Jackson hated Native Americans? Or do you think maybe he had this feeling of, I'm better than them, but I'm going to take care of these poor innocent people that don't know how to do anything? Write me an email. Tell me what you think and why. Let's continue on here. Let's talk about the Indian Removal Act. And I'm going to speed things up a little bit because I'm getting near the end of the video. The Indian Removal Act was passed by the Senate 49 to 28. So the Senate was a huge gap in who wanted it and who didn't. In the House of Representatives, though, the voting was a lot closer. 102 people voted for it, 97 people voted against it. Now, what was the Indian Removal Act? Well, this is what it was. It allowed Jackson to grant lands west of the Mississippi to tribes in exchange for their homelands. So Native Americans would give their homelands to the American government, and in exchange, these Native Americans then would move to lands that were west of the Mississippi River, far away from where they were, but also far away from American settlers who kept trying to take their land. Now, this was supposed to be a voluntary move. It was supposed to be peaceful. You notice I use the word supposed to, or words. The Native Americans would get the following. They first off would get materials to help them build their new lives. They were supposed to get money. And they were supposed to get protection from the American government when they got to their new land. Does this sound familiar to you? Stevens Treaties, maybe, when we learn about Washington State history? The Native Americans were supposed to be put in a place where there'd be no Americans. At this point in American history, settlers were not thinking about this land, this purple area on this map. This map actually shows you the land that the natives lost and the routes they took to get to those lands, their new lands. All right, last slide here. Let's talk about the consequences of the act. First off, they signed almost 70 removal treaties by 1836. So in 6 years, 70 treaties. 50,000 natives were moved west of the Mississippi River. As a result, millions of acres of land were opened east of the Mississippi for settlers who wanted land. Now let's talk about some of the consequences to the Indian Removal Act from the native standpoint. Now, some Native American tribes went peacefully to their new homes west of the Mississippi River. Others flat out ignored the act. And as a result of that, private individuals, private American citizens, settled on native land, with the natives still living there, of course, or some American citizens were able to cheat the natives out of their land through various deals. Some Native Americans fought to stay. An example of this would be the Second Seminole War. Finally, some Native Americans forcibly were moved, such as a Trail of Tears, which occurred after Andrew Jackson was out of office. Lastly, here's a political cartoon I'd like for you to take a look at, so I encourage you to pause this video. This political cartoon is one cartoonist's viewpoint of the Indian Removal Act and what it did to Native Americans. Thank you for watching this video. Please go to Edmodo to answer any questions on there, and I'll see you in class, as always, tomorrow.